I want to take a moment because I love books, and I'm here to talk about some books, obviously, but I love libraries. So I want to talk about libraries for just a second. I have always considered libraries to really be the beating heart of any college campus. And, forget those old stereotypes, right? Dusty books on a shelf and librarians that don't look like ours running around going, shh, every time you try to have a conversation. That's not what it's about now. Libraries are truly dynamic hubs of learning. Yes, they're a home for books, of course. There are countless volumes of knowledge in this building. But something we have to keep in mind is in our digital age, a lot of people think that perhaps libraries are, less important. Maybe they're fading away a little bit. But actually the opposite is true. I believe they are more essential than ever. They provide access to technology, they provide collaborative learning spaces for group projects, and they really are one space you see a seamless blend of the traditional and digital learning happening in one spot. But most importantly, I think libraries offer something that is kind of rare in our hyper-connected world. A space for truly deep thinking and focused study. In a time we are constantly distracted by our phones and everything else, libraries remain a sanctuary for learning. Curiosity thrives in this space. This is the space that our next generation of thinkers and leaders are growing. I've always believed that books animate spaces. They animate a home, they animate a library, they animate a college. If you come to my home, you will find books everywhere, on every surface, in every room, and every type of book you can imagine, okay? You will find books about dogs, travel, poetry. You will find classics sitting right next to the latest bestsellers. Why? It's not just because I love to read and love books, which is true, but it's because at their core, I believe that what books do is open us to the world. Really, they do. So I was originally asked to come and talk about my 9 favorite books. And okay, that seemed like a very reasonable request, you guys, it really did. For someone who loves books as much as I do, I quickly became completely paralyzed by that. I found it impossible. It was like being asked to choose a favorite child. I can't do it. I love them all, and it was not possible. So I said, I can't. I'm happy to come and speak in the library, but I cannot say these are my 9 favorite books. So we shifted a little bit. So I'm going to share 9 books with you today. All of them are important to me. They're not necessarily my favorites, and maybe not quite the most influential in my life, but they all tell a story about my journey as a learner and as a reader. Okay? I want to start with a book that truly is one of my favorites. I mean, if I were pushed on 9, this would have been on the list. This is America's First Daughter. Anybody read it? Oh, a few. Okay, excellent. It's a very good book. Okay, recommend this. This is a historical novel. It's grounded in really extensive research, which I love. The pages in the back that provide references are almost as thick as the book itself, so you really can track back everything in it, which is great. It's the story of Martha Patsy Jefferson Randolph. Okay, that's Thomas Jefferson's eldest daughter. It follows her from childhood to adulthood, but it really focuses on the role that she played in shaping her father's legacy. I appreciate this book a lot. It has a lot of rich historical detail, which is great. It also helps us see the past through a specific person's eyes, which I really like. It reminds us of the often overlooked contributions of women in history. Contributions that are often understated and sometimes completely ignored. The author's powerful questions that are posed through Patsy's story are basically this. Whose story is not being told? Whose perspective do we not hear? And whose contributions are important but sometimes completely overlooked? Those questions are relevant for us today, maybe even more so than they were in Patsy's time. The novel's a compelling reminder that they're really important, famous figures in history, and we study all of them, but what we don't study are the people who stood right beside them and allowed them to do the amazing things that they did. That's why I love this book. I want to take a moment and now shifting. You'll see there are 2 children's books out here that I chose, which I'm sure some people found a little odd. I believe really strong in the power of reading to children, starting in infancy. I think it really is crucial to development. About 80% of a child's brain is developed before they turn 3. before they turn 3 years old. So those bedtime stories that we're reading to kids, that's not just a nice cozy moment. You are actually building their brain when you do that. That's remarkable. We know from research that children who are read to have much greater language skills before their first birthday than those who are not. And then if we advance all the way to kindergarten, children who have been read to regularly when they're younger have nearly 290,000 more words in their familiar vocabulary than those who were not. That's 250,000 more opportunities to understand, to wonder, to be curious, and to communicate. But language isn't just about the words, right? It's about the cadence and the rhythm. They're learning those things, but what I think is really beautiful about it is the joy of discovery. Because I think these kids are learning to associate books with comfort and learning with love. And I think that's really special. So that's why I have 2 children's books. First, Where the Wild Things Are. Other than Jeff and I, anyone else read this book as a child? Okay, yes, this one's familiar to a lot of people. This is a Caldecott Award winner. It's very well known. This is a book that my father read to me regularly. And it's one of those, I went through a phase where every night, what book do you want? Oh, Where the Wild Things Are. Y'all, I don't know why. The book's a little bit scary, really. I mean, there are like these giant monsters in this book, okay? For those of you who haven't read, or if you don't remember, the story follows this little boy named Max. He is really mischievous. He gets in a ton of trouble. And so he sails away to the land of the wild things where he can become their king. And he thinks that's really great because he can do whatever he wants. And for a mischievous child, that was a big deal. But along the way, he discovers a really profound truth about life, as described by the author. What Max loved the most was being around the people who loved him the most and making them proud of him. I think even as an adult, that resonates, right? Because let's face it, in our world, there will always be monsters, there will always be wild things, and there will always be a deep human need to be with the people who love us the most and have a home. So eventually, as you know, it became my turn to start reading to someone else. So I started curating books for my own children. Introducing them to the wonders of literature was important to me. So I called them, and as you all know, I have 3 children in their 20s, and I said, hey, what books do you remember most from when you were really young? And I heard everything, right? I heard everything ranging from the Butter Battle book. Anybody know that one? I mean, it's okay if you don't, but okay, from the Butter Battle book all the way to The Princess and the Three Knights. Very different books. There was only one book that every single one of them not only mentioned, but said, you have to choose that one, Mom. Enter Pinkalicious. Really? Okay, other than Stella, who might know this book, anybody else know Pinkalicious? Yeah? Okay. It's a good book, isn't it, Stella?
It's a musical now.
Oh. Oh, we have to go. Okay, okay, so enter Pinkalicious. Pinkalicious is a playful story about a little girl who loves pink. Okay, in her own words, for me, pink is more than a color. It's an attitude. So one day, she eats way too many pink cupcakes, and she turns pink, head to toe. You've seen the book, right? Yeah, okay. So she turns pink from head to toe, and she loves that. And then she realizes maybe she doesn't want to be pink for the rest of her life. And so with the help of her parents, she cures this by eating a lot of green vegetables, goes back to normal, and learns an important lesson about balance and moderation along the way. But here's the real reason that my grown children selected this book. It was not about the story, and it's a lovely story, and it wasn't about reading. It is because this book is an inside joke in our family. My daughter loved this book, and she is the youngest, so the boys heard it read constantly. To this day, and I'll go ahead and tell you because this might happen to some of you, to this day, if you were at our home and it starts raining, someone is going to start reciting the opening lines of this book. It goes like this. It was a rainy day, too wet to go outside. Mommy said, let's make cupcakes. What color would you like? Pink, I said, pink, pink, pink. Imagine a 26-year-old boy doing that. It happens every time it rains at my home, okay? So we have very cherished memories of reading to our children and being read to as children. I want to step back in time a little bit and talk about something that's kind of remarkable, and that is the way books and stories have shaped human history. Long before we had actual books and libraries, families still gathered to share stories. We called these frequently great oral traditions, right? The adventures of Odysseus and the bravery of Achilles. They weren't just stories. These were the foundations of entire civilizations. So from those traditions came written works that still shape our world, the parables of the Bible, the dialogues of Plato, each carrying wisdom throughout centuries. Just as we pass stories to our children today, the generation before us preserved knowledge by passing down these stories. So the next book I want to talk about briefly is the Bible. This translation of the Bible, The Message, was written by Eugene Peterson. I chose this because when my husband Travis was in graduate school studying theology, Eugene was his advisor and became a great mentor in his life. They were very close all the way up to Eugene's death. So we got to know him really well. Eugene was a wordsmith and a poet, and he had a great sensitivity to language. He was really into the cadences and rhythms of the human voice. As a writer and a scholar, he set out to have his life work be translating ancient Hebrew and Greek texts from their original language into like a fresh and contemporary take on it. When Travis met Eugene, I think he was in year 2 of what took him 10 years to translate the Bible in that way. His purpose was to make the readings of the Bible more accessible to a broader population. If you look at the success of the sales of the Message, you will see that that worked out well. I'm going to read a really short passage to you to kind of give an example of how he changed the language to make it a little more accessible. I chose just a few lines from what we frequently call the love chapter. This is 1 Corinthians 13, because most people, even if you don't read the Bible, have heard this at weddings, because everyone uses this one at their weddings. Eugene's version says this: "Love never gives up. Love cares more for others than self. It does not want what it doesn't have. It doesn't strut, doesn't force itself on others, and it is not always me first." So you can see in that translation, different than what you might hear at weddings, he's trying to make the language very plain and accessible to people. The next book on my list is The Odyssey. Okay, who has read or tried to read this? An attempt I'll take. Okay, great. Like the Bible, this goes way back into the ancient world. But for me, talking about this book takes me back to a specific place and a specific person. When I was a senior in high school, my honors English teacher, Mrs. Billings, she had this really unique ability to see every student. You guys know professors and teachers like that. You just know they get you, right? Mrs. Billings was like that. And what she saw in me was someone who sat in the back of the room and was really bored. Because I was really bored, because I was a voracious reader. So I got the list of the books for the class and I read them all, and then I was bored. And so she pulled me aside one day and she said, "Aimee, I'm going to give you a different assignment if you're willing to take it." And I was like, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And so she challenged me to read Plato's Republic. How many of you have read that? Not as many. Yeah, in high school, whew. Okay, and so of course I was like, okay, I'll read anything. Wow, that was different and hard at that age. And then she wanted me to give a presentation to the class about the allegory of the cave. Also really challenging. But what it did was completely re-engage me. And doing that opened my mind to these ancient works and how fascinating and educational they can be. I chose the Odyssey for this list, though, because I think it's pretty amazing. This book is over 2,500 years old. The story is. And it is still frequently regarded as one of the greatest stories of all time. So for this talk, I specifically chose Emily Wilson's translation. This one came out in 2017, and it's the first translation by a woman, which is really exciting, and it's very well done. I want to read to you how she begins this tale. "Tell me about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went and who he met, and the pain he suffered on the sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men back home." She does a beautiful job with this translation. If you haven't read it yet, pick up Emily's translation and start it now, because Christopher Nolan is directing a major film adaptation in 2026, and you're going to want to be ahead of that. Always read the book first, people, always. So while ancient texts like the Odyssey and the Republic wrestle with these eternal questions of justice and truth, today's nonfiction does that as well, but sometimes in fresh and surprising ways. The next book is Eligible for Execution. I'm guessing no one's read this. Anyone read this one? Oh, see, I was right. Okay. This is one of my favorites. It would have been on my favorites list again if I had really pushed myself to 9. But I'm completely biased because this is one of many, many books that my father wrote. I have never met an adult over the age of about 30 with a degree in political science who was not familiar with my father's scholarly work or who was not forced to read many of his textbooks throughout their college years. For many decades, Dad's 2-volume constitutional law books were standard textbooks across the country. Another book he wrote, called A Court Divided, won the prestigious V.O. Key Award for Best Book on Southern Politics. And the dedication inside that cover reads, "To Aimee and Emily for their spirit and their love." That was very kind of him, given that as a child and adolescent, I teased him endlessly that his books were so boring. Like, "Dad, there's no story, there's no dialogue, it's not exciting." This book is different, though. This one I really loved. This is a book about the murder of a young man that took place in 1996. It follows the arrest and subsequent trials of an 18-year-old. But that's not really what the story is about. The story is really about the debate about whether he was mentally competent enough to be executed for his crime. So Dad followed the case through the lower courts all the way to the Supreme Court, where execution was at that time determined to be cruel and unusual punishment by a vote of 6-3 at the Supreme Court. So in a loose connection to Meredith, one of our most distinguished visitors, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, voted with the majority on this, siding with the position that the death penalty was in fact cruel and unusual punishment for individuals with intellectual disabilities. That did not end the matter, as Dad explains clearly in the book. No spoilers here, you should read it and find out. Okay, so far on my list of 9, we have visited my childhood, we've wandered some caves of the ancient world, we've been in a courtroom. Let's go to the kitchen. Okay, when I put this on my list, I forgot how heavy it was. Okay, this is a very big book, y'all. Okay, so The Joy of Cooking. I know a cookbook probably seems like a really weird choice, and when you walked in and looked, you were like, there's a cookbook on the table. Okay, yeah. But keep in mind, cookbooks are not just collections of recipes. Okay? Cookbooks are expressions of culture and philosophy and ways of living. When we open a modern cookbook, we're not just learning to prepare food, we're engaging with all kinds of questions about tradition and sustainability and human connection. Those are all really important concepts. You know, the act of preparing food and breaking bread with other people is really powerful. It's an expression of love and care. It's not just about nourishment, but it's about love. Think about all the times that we gather for food, right? If you want to meet up with a friend, maybe you go to lunch or you grab coffee. How frequently do we have sheet cakes and other things at Meredith for any event, right? You have to feed people. Food brings us together. So that's why I chose to include a cookbook. I actually have an original Watkins cookbook that dates back to 1936. It was my grandmother's. I love that book so much. It's one of my most prized possessions. I didn't bring it because it's very old and very fragile, and when I'm not looking at it, it lives in a Ziploc gallon bag so that I can keep it at least a little protected. So many hands have touched that book. There are handwritten notes from generations in my family all over it. It is stained, right? Culinary pixie dust, right? Flour and spices all over it, but I truly love it. And when I'm thinking of motivation in the kitchen, I look to it often. I come from a long line of people who love to cook. So I chose The Joy of Cooking instead of that one because it's out of print and this is more accessible to all of you. So I want to transition now from cookbooks to something different. So while we look at a chef's world, okay, guiding us through recipes to stories of culture and tradition, we also need to look at memoirs. My last 2 books specifically are memoirs. So we're moving from the art of cooking to an art of storytelling with this. These bring personal histories and experiences to life in ways that really show us a connection to the human experience. My next book, Eat, Pray, Love. Okay, how many have read it? How many have seen the movie? Okay, both are good, but always read it first. Okay, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert is, at its most basic, a story about rebuilding her life after a divorce. The author spends a year traveling the world, hoping to kind of rediscover herself. So she goes to Italy, where she learns to appreciate food in a different way. I can connect with that. In India, she seeks spiritual transformation. And she says, you need to learn how to select your thoughts just the same way you select your clothes every day. This is a power that you can cultivate. I think that's really important. I think it's a great reminder that sometimes the hardest things for us to control are our thoughts. Finally, she goes to Indonesia, and when she's in Indonesia, she finds new love and a fresh start. She embraces this idea. Each of us must prepare for endless and riotous waves of transformation. I love that quote. Riotous waves of transformation. That's really what the book is about, how you can transform and recreate your life. Gilbert also reminds us of this. There is a crack or cracks in everyone. That is how the light of God gets in. That's a powerful message. And what she's really saying is that our flaws, struggles, heartbreak, all of those things that we always feel like you have to push through are really great opportunities to let light and change enter your world. Eat, Pray, Love was a really popular book club book, as you might imagine. I love book clubs. How many of you are in a book club? Yeah, so good. Book clubs offer more than just a reason to read. They offer connection to other people. They create a space for conversations, and I think they remind us that reading isn't supposed to be always a solitary event. Reading alongside other people and having conversations is a great opportunity to build community and connect with other people. So my last title of my 9 is Educated by Tara Westover. How many have read it? It's a great book, really good book. This was a book club book for me. When I was a provost, I used to hold a book club every summer for faculty. Anybody who wanted to spend some time together socially in the slower days of summer would come together once a month and we'd talk about a book. This was a social thing that my faculty really enjoyed. So a few years ago, I selected Educated as one of our books. This book is about the power of education to change people's lives, and in this case, actually change the trajectory of a family. This is a girl, Tara. She grew up in a survivalist family. So what this really means is her family lived completely off the grid. Okay, so they were in isolation. There was a deep distrust of formal education and healthcare and social services and government institutions. So really no connection. So Tara finds as she grows up that she has to negotiate her family's really powerful belief system with her own, perhaps more powerful, curiosity about what the world was really like. She ends up going to school and earning degrees, and it's a beautiful story about how that changes her. The author writes one of my favorite quotes. My life was narrated to me by others. Their voices were forceful, emphatic, and absolute. It had never occurred to me that my voice might be as strong as theirs. So you can see how that book resonates with me. And what it means to me in the context of Meredith College, because that's what we're doing here, right? That's the whole purpose. We're helping students narrate their lives, speak for themselves, and find their path. So there you have it. 9 books that are important to me. In some cases, they transport me back in time to specific places or people. In other places, they helped shape who I am in life and served as mile markers in my journey. I want to conclude with one more quote by author Annie Lamott. She's a very prolific writer, and she knows a thing or two about the truly hypnotic power of books. She writes, "If you love to read or can learn to love reading, you will have an amazing life, period. Life will always have hardships, pressure, and incredibly annoying people, but books will make it all worthwhile. In books, you will find your North Star, and you will find you, which is why you're here." I think that's kind of a great commercial for libraries and colleges and bookstores. In other words, what Lamott is saying is this library is an invitation to a truly amazing life. And Meredith College is a North Star that provides a powerful compass for young people. And these books are an opportunity to discover who you are in the community with authors and readers and all the characters, real or imagined, that you might find along the way in life and on the printed page. Thank you so much for joining us.